COP28 has been underway for more than a week. If you were reading the news when the event started last Thursday, you might have heard about a historic deal on loss and damage that quickly went viral. The richest countries pledged hundreds of millions of dollars in aid to developing countries that are on the front line of climate change. This all sounds impressive, and the COP's presidency would have you believe that this is a historic, unprecedented conference of parties. But maybe we shouldn't celebrate just yet. Let's take a look at this pivotal issue of climate change adaptation and see what's really going on behind the scenes. This is your COP in Review. This year's climate summit didn't get off to the greatest start. If you watched our last video, you may remember that the UAE quickly came under fire for using the climate talks as a stage to get more oil deals. The president of the COP and CEO of the Abu Dhabi National Oil Company, Sultan Al Jaber, has faced a lot of criticism this week for his conflict of interest on fossil fuels. Jaber has talked about fossil fuel phase-outs in a way that borders on climate denialism, but more on that later. For now, let's just focus on COP28's poster child, the Loss and Damage Fund. To do that, let's first talk about something similar: adaptation policy. Adaptation is the practice of creating more resilient communities and systems to deal with the impacts of anthropogenic climate change, such as disasters, biodiversity loss, and increased temperature worldwide. More often than not, these impacts are suffered by the global south, who do not have the tools to bounce back from disaster after disaster. Small island nations and developing states are not responsible for the large majority of the world's emissions, but they still suffer the worst as a result of global warming. That's where loss and damage comes in. You see, it's not just about adaptation because some things can no longer be adapted to. Countries in the global north must recognize the role they have played in this historic climate inequity and offer reparations to the global south for loss and damage right now. It's not about adapting to climate change in the future. It's about paying back what is owed to countries that are experiencing the worst of global warming as we speak. Since the early 1990s, developing countries have pushed developed countries to create this Loss and Damage Fund, or L&D Fund for short, to serve as reparations for this historic climate inequity. Finally, at last year's COP27 in Egypt, countries agreed on the formal creation of the L&D Fund for developing nations to cope with climate change. However, they didn't agree to any official structure or implementation until this year. And they sure came out swinging at COP28. On the very first day of the COP, countries pledged upwards of $700 million to the Loss and Damage Fund. Exciting, I know. But this number is almost meaningless compared to the hundreds of billions of dollars needed by developing countries to deal with climate change every single year. Still, maybe it's a strong start. Let's break that $700 million number down. The UAE, who's hosting the event, has pledged $100 million to the fund. They were joined by France, Germany, and Italy, who all pledged about $100 million as well. The rest of the fund was contributed to by different parties. Now, there's a country I haven't mentioned just yet. You may be wondering how much the US, the world's richest country, donated. Take a second to guess. Do you have a number yet? $17.5 million. You heard me right. The US pledged a laughably low amount of money, calling into question the commitment of developed countries to fix the problems of climate change that they caused in the first place. It's also headed by the World Bank, an international bank with a questionable reputation for greenlighting unsustainable and unjust development programs across the global south. As the cherry on top, questions remain on how to distribute these funds in a just and equitable manner. The World Bank's funding board is extremely restrictive, and it doesn't include voices from civil society or indigenous perspectives. The effectiveness of the L&D Fund remains to be seen. Don't get us wrong, the L&D Fund is a step in the right direction, but it's a tiny step that should have been taken decades ago. It is not the spectacle that the COP would have you believe, and we should hold our applause. If you want to learn more about why the L&D Fund isn't what it's cracked out to be, make sure to read our research piece on The Conversation that explores the L&D Fund in greater detail. And thanks for watching.